Adapting a movie from a popular source material can prove to be a massive challenge, especially if the source material has a hardcore fanbase that knows the ins and outs of the tiniest of details of the source material. If you mess up in adapting an iconic property for the screen or television, the fans of that IP will be so mad at you. Despite countless examples, studios still have not learnt not to do this and are continuing to make adaptations that show no respect to the source material for generic adaptations trying to hit on a recent success, thus angering a fanbase and causing the movie to lose a lot of money. Take 2024's Borderlands, a movie adapted from the popular first-person shooter game that Lionsgate ruined for its fans, treating them second to making a horrible Guardians of the Galaxy ripoff to try and capitalise on the success of Guardians and appease the masses. Let me explain. Hi all, I'm the Grinning Critic and I love talking about movies with a grin. And believe me when I say that I wanted to be talking about Borderlands with a grin. This movie looked like it was gonna be so my thing, but unfortunately it's an awful movie and that just makes me have a massive frown on my face. Now, I feel like when a movie is really successful for doing something so unique that no other movie has really done before, there are a ton of studios who try and capitalise on this movie's success. And while some find success in using this formula in their films, there are loads more failed attempts. James Gunn is a remarkably talented writer and director, and through picking an ensemble of obscure comic book characters who he understood, and having a clear vision that had a unique flavour to it, with an effective balance of music, comedy, character development, world building, and emotion, crafted a masterpiece, and my personal favourite superhero movie of all time, Guardians of the Galaxy. Lionsgate, when acquiring the rights to this property way back in 2015, luckily saw Guardians as the hot new thing, so they decided to make something that had this film's tone and flavour, instead of making a faithful adaptation of the game to make this film more accessible. Instead of making this feel like a spiritual sequel to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, they made a Guardians of the Galaxy film without incorporating any of what made Guardians of the Galaxy successful. Now, to explain where this film went wrong, I think it's useful to do a comparison to Guardians of the Galaxy. The Guardians of the Galaxy films were famous for their effective use of needle drops, especially in action sequences, often adding a fun sense of kineticism and excitement to the action sequences. In Borderlands, the sound mixing of the needle drops is atrocious, with their sound being drowned out at a low volume to sound effects and dialogue making the music feel like background noise. The Guardians of the Galaxy all had great chemistry with one another, with each member feeling perfectly cast for their respective role and delivering fantastic performances. In Borderlands, the chemistry is unapparent, with every character being so unlikable and hateful towards each other. The casting choices are also really horrible. Cate Blanchett is awfully miscast as Lilith, being over a quarter of a century too old to play the character. Kevin Hart is terrible as Roland, and you don't buy it for a second that in the game, his character was supposed to have a romantic relationship with Lilith. I heard that Kevin Hart wanted to be in this film because he wanted an action role. Good for him, I'm glad that he wanted an action role. I think that a 90s style throwback action movie would have worked a lot better for Kevin Hart as opposed to this. This is the one that really saddens me. Jack Black is so annoying as Claptrap. The only person who gives a somewhat commendable performance is Ariane Greenblatt as Tiny Tina, who gives off a performance that has a lot of energy and enthusiasm, but on the most part was horribly misguided by the film's directing, thus the performance feeling a bit too over the top. The characters in Guardians of the Galaxy all felt real, with unique personalities, well-written backstories, and through their strong characterizations, they drew out powerful emotional responses from the viewer. The characters in Borderlands come out of nowhere and are really forgettable. The biggest waste is Florian Muntean as Krieg, this side character who does nothing, but has a really lame costume that looks like it belongs in a Mad Max film. The other franchise that this film is ripping off, which I think is a real shame. Muntean now probably would have been great in the role if he was working with a better script. The characters are all very one-note, and it feels hard to believe that any of them had a life out of this movie. And it is impossible to care about these characters because they don't draw out any emotional response. The writing in Guardians of the Galaxy was pure cinematic genius, filled with numerous clever quips, witty dialogue, while tackling heavy themes. The writing in Borderlands is messy, with horribly written dialogue that flows really awkwardly. Every plot point happens so conveniently. There is literally a scene in the movie where Claptrap claims that the chance of getting to a place without dying is 2%, but yet the characters make it to this place with no trouble at all. The plot in Guardians was clear, and the team all shared a clear motivation, driving them to learn to work together. While in Borderlands, the plot is disinteresting and forgettable, with no driving motivation bringing these characters together. Now, many say that the weakest element of Guardians of the Galaxy is its villain, Ronan the Accuser. I think he's a really underrated villain. He is a compelling force that brings our team together and gives them a reason to exist. He has a cool character design, and his scenes are really moody in tone, which is a perfect contrast with the light-hearted, colourful tone of the rest of the movie, which is a highly effective visual choice that Gunn made. Borderlands sidelines its villain Atlas, giving him next to no screen time, so you really don't care about him at all and know very little about him. Now, Lionsgate made a very interesting choice in terms of who they picked as the director. I find Eli Roth to be a very unusual choice for this film. Eli Roth is a director who is known for highly violent horror films, so it feels very unusual for him to direct an action film like this. I've heard RLM describe that since Roth seems to be a director who hasn't found his path to success yet, maybe this film he was trying to do what James Gunn did. If you look at James Gunn's early career, it has some similarities to Eli Roth's, and through Guardians of the Galaxy, James Gunn was able to break into Hollywood. Roth was clearly hoping that making his Guardians of the Galaxy would achieve the same results, but that clearly won't work out. But what I find useful when a film blatantly rips off another is to think what the film would be like for a person who has never seen the film that's been ripped off. And in the case of Borderlands, if you have never seen Guardians of the Galaxy, this would still be an awful movie. From a basic filmmaking standpoint, this film fails. The action sequences are mediocre, the villain appears way too little in the movie for him to be compelling, and the editing is really choppy. Now, I know I've spent so much time just complaining about this movie, about how bad it is, but if I be honest with you, the movie does have a few positives to it. The visuals are the one element of this film that I'd be prepared to give the pass to. Sure, the desert scenes feel awfully familiar to The Wasteland and Mad Max, with oversaturated colours being used to highlight its oppressive nature, but the universe is explored, its character and set designs have a charm to them even though, yes, they do feel reminiscent of Guardians of the Galaxy. Look, I'm a sucker for sci-fi universes, so a sci-fi movie must be absolutely awful for me to not get somewhat invested in this universe. Another thing I really liked was that the character of Tiny Tina has these toys that when you throw them at people, they explode, which I thought was a cool and interesting idea. In conclusion, whereas Guardians of the Galaxy was what if Star Wars met Star Trek and Indiana Jones in the best way possible, Borderlands was what if Guardians of the Galaxy met Mad Max in the worst way possible. I'm gonna give Borderlands a D. This movie really disappointed me, and that just makes me really sad, as I so badly wanted to absolutely love this movie and say it was my favourite movie of the year. But I have to be honest here, this movie really did suck. Thank you so much for watching, and I'm the Grinning Critic, and don't forget to subscribe to me. It'll make me grinning again, that's for sure.